Right. So,
Yeah.
some of the challenges involved in subsidiary governance. Now, I think you've both worked in
Yeah.
big groups of companies. So, some reflections that you've had. So, starting with you then, Joshua.
Flow of information.
Flow of information.
Yeah, being a very big one, I would say.
So, what can be the blockers?
Things not being, I guess, saved in suitable locations or passed to the relevant parties that need to be aware of certain information, essentially. Whether it be the actual operations of a business or the offices or changes in that
Yeah.
respect. That could be a big challenge, especially when sometimes that information is needed quite urgently.
So, can consistency be a problem?
Yeah,
People
yeah,
saving them in different places, in different ways, different formats,
yeah,
and then not knowing where that is.
yeah. Because even though it's saved in different locations, that's of
Yeah.
course is understandable. It could be saved in a central location to make it a bit easier, or at least pointers to that location.
And I think that's it kind of when you look at your governance framework, it's really important to incorporate the subsidiaries into that because if there's proper processes in place that says across the business, all the information is on blueprints or all the information needs to be inputted into gems, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be up to date. So kind of having sort of a proper kind of governance framework that encompasses not just the top co, it kind of encompasses the group so everybody fully understands when we do something, this is how we do it, this is where it needs to be reported to, this is what needs to be updated, those kind of things. So everybody's working in alignments. Otherwise, if you've got a big enough group and, kind of could be cross jurisdictional and all sorts of things, and people are just doing stuff that you would, you could be changing directors and that locally, nobody's going to know. So the information is potentially out of date or
So sorry to
inaccurate.
interrupt, but
No.
so going back to that consistency point, and who owns that? Who makes sure that it's all being done properly?
Not in my experience, it's quite often somebody in the COSIC team of TopCo
Yeah.
that will have oversight of that. So whether it's kind of a quarterly assurance from local jurisdictions or that kind of thing. So you have to give the accountability and the ownership to kind of the local kind of hubs or whatever it may be. So you need somebody responsible. So whether it's kind of, as somebody like a TMF or a local law firm or a local legal person you might have in that place, you give accountability to those to look after whatever part of the group that they are responsible for, because they're going to have to day-to-day manage things, update things, file things and those kind of things, but have something on them where there is a framework of some kind of assurance at some point that things have been done, things have been checked and they are up to date.
Yeah. So so what you're saying, outsourcing is a business reality, isn't it,
It
for a
is.
large group
If you're
of
in a large
companies?
group, you have
Particularly
to, because you can't know.
with an international presence.
Yeah.
Because you can't be an expert in every
No,
jurisdiction. So you have to rely on it. So you have to control those relationships
Yes.
as well.
Well, that's the thing. You're going to have to be the person who kind of owns those relationships.
But do you have the authority and ability to do that effectively? How do you do that?
Well, normally there would be either I've worked in where we've kind of divvied up jurisdictions. So, for example, where I've looked after Canada, South America, Russia, and certain jurisdictions, I would then own the relationship with the service providers within those countries. I would be the person they come to, they would be the person I go to, those kind of things. So, and it's kind of keeping the dialogue open, asking the questions.
So building that relationship.
It's very important. That's it. So that you kind of know what's going on. You know if something happens, they're going to come to you because you don't have oversight on what's going on there. So you need to trust that sort of know when the board meetings are. Make sure you get a copy of those minutes. Kind of just making sure that things are uploaded in the right place, done in a certain time. So almost having a bit of an SLE in place.
Yes,
With,
that's what you need to.
Yeah, when it's big enough, you kind of have to manage it, and those relationships, and which are often could be internal or external, but you really do have to keep on top of it and make sure that they know the expectation. So
I mean, how important is it actually, do you think? Say you've got subsidiaries in different parts of the world to actually meet these people. Say we're in your head HQs in London where you work. How important is it for them to come to you? And do you think, have you ever worked in a place where you had part of that, your role is to go out and to the actual jurisdictions themselves and have a look at it yourself?
I've had it where you sort of do meet the people. A lot of the time they'll be brought over, or I worked for a big Norwegian group many years ago, and they work that even though they were global, every single person that worked for them had a week in Norway where their head office was. So every person, irrespective of what your job title was, would
What
go
time
to
of year
Norway
did
for a
did
week.
people go?
Well, I went in summer.
Yeah, I bet you did.
Of course. But that was great because you really, I think it makes that I value sort of kind of in-person interaction. I think
Yes.
you really do need that. And even if you can't do it regularly, I think it's really important to either go to people and just meet them in person. You know, even if it's maybe when the board cycle is happening
Yeah.
once or twice, whatever it can be, or bring them over, you know, just whenever you can, because I think, you know, building those relationships and having and getting to know somebody in person, or even if you're just meeting them once or twice, makes all the difference at the end of the day.
And I was just smiling because I remember that a COSEC I used to work for, she went over to Australia once a year to try and get to a subsidiary there. She'd go for a long weekend. So you go for 3 nights or something
To
like
Australia?
that. Yes, Australia. And then wonder why the relationship never got any better.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
just
you
think
need
like-
time, and
Yes,
you know, I think we
it's
do it a
important
lot
to-
with boards where
yeah.
you have them having kind of board meetings at different sites and that at different
Yes.
times. You know,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
really important. But I think equally, even in other parts of the business, it's important to have that sort of meeting and interaction with people. And maybe going there for a week or whatever and sitting with the team and working with them and kind of seeing their challenges and how they do things and all of that.
It was really about, you introduced that one, Joshua, that the flow of information.
Yeah.
And you expanded on that. So some of the other challenges that you've seen.
Yeah, I think with cultural differences, especially if you work with overseas subsidiaries, which you most likely will do,
Yeah.
you realize that other jurisdictions, their laws and regulations and their general business processes are a lot different to the UK's. One issue that I've found to be very prominent is trying to explain to a director the way that something is done in the UK. It cannot be done the same in a different jurisdiction. So they need to understand that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to certain processes that they may be accustomed to. So I think getting them to understand that has always proven to be an issue. You know, I've ran into situations in the past where we've had to have board meetings cancelled and rescheduled just because this director wasn't prepared for that, because they were unable to make the time to prepare. But then to them, because it's an overseas sub, they don't see it as an important business consideration at the time.
Right.
Now,
So how do you tackle that? How do you address that?
Again, I would say it's down to flow of information. So I mean, to resolve the issue, essentially what we did is myself and my colleagues sat down and we just created a high-level brief as a presenter to them and said, look, this is what is in the board pack. This is the reason why certain matters are being addressed in the meeting. You know, yeah, just
So it's an education piece, isn't it? So
Yeah,
just
I was about to
explaining
say
it.
that's a really big thing, is educating people on,
yeah,
if your top co is in whatever jurisdiction, is kind of educating those in, well, this is what it entails in working for a group that's headed in this jurisdiction. This is how things work. This is the expectations, you know. And I think another piece is not just the corporate requirements are very different. Culturally, we're really different. How you speak to people, how you engage with them, the ways of working, expectations, that's hugely different. And when I was at that Norwegian company again, they actually sent all of us on a cultural communication course, which was amazing because it was so interesting, because they knew we were working with jurisdictions around the world. They did that for everybody, and it was fascinating even just to see, because they color coded the different countries and stuff, and it literally drilled down to, how do you greet in an email somebody from America, somebody from the UK, somebody from Africa? We were all so different. So, you know, like if in South Africa and stuff, you'd often start your email, hi, how's the family, la la la, okay, this is what we want, kind of thing. Whereas if you email somebody in the UK something like that, they'd be like, No.
Yeah, it's true. It's
But
true.
if you want the best out of people
No, of
and
course,
have
you've
a
got to find
good
that way of
relationship
communicating,
with
yeah.
them,
Yeah.
you do have to kind of, it's good to say, okay, well, this is the top code, this is a jurisdiction, and this is how we need to do things. Fair enough. But there are also
Yeah.
nuances in that relationship
Sensitivities.
building
Yeah.
Yeah.
in how you interact with those people. And I think it is a business's responsibility to understand the different people they have working for them as well. So you have your black and white, these are the expectations, this is our framework, this is what we expect of you. But equally, how do we best interact with you?
Do they give you templates to use?
They did. They gave us kind of like examples of like the
Right.
different, like if it's a blue country, this
Right.
is kind of how people interact better and, you know, those kind of things. So it was, I think it
What
was
colour did they give the UK?
blue.
Blue?
Yes.
Navy blue or?
It was a navy blue. Quite like, yeah.
And red would be, it's a bit more direct and dominant and straight. Okay. So
Blue was more actually, so the
Oh, really?
Nordics, all
more
of that was
formal,
more
maybe.
formal,
Oh, I see,
whereas
yeah.
the reds and the yellows and that were strangely enough more warm,
Okay.
if you think of it
fair.
that way.
Yeah.
Blue, but not cold, but
formal, maybe.
yes.
Yeah.
Whereas the reds and the yellows, we more like, yeah, how's the family? How you been doing? Like, you know, that kind of.
What's
And
the
then we get
friendliest country, you say, in terms of that communication sense?
Communication, I would say India.
Yeah.
The people I
Yeah.
worked with in India, I find them to be over polite. Not in a bad way, of
No,
course.
no.
But I mean,
Yeah.
something
Yes,
over polite. It's, you know, it's
yes.
greetings, it's
Helpful.
dear, it's hi, it's you know,
Mister.
it's, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mr. Joshua,
Yes.
Mr. The,
Yeah, yeah.
Even UAE, I found to be quite,
Yeah. But
over
also
polite as well.
we do stuff like, so obviously this isn't a corporate thing, but like for example, back home, I would never call somebody older than me by their name. They'd be auntie or uncle so and so. That's how we grow up.
Yeah.
Whereas like when I'm over here and stuff, like I've got friends who have very young children and they just call me by my name, and I still get quite like like, oh,
Yeah.
Monique.
Yes.
Yes. It's very, it's like, but it's so straight. So culturally we are very, you know, you kind of very, I come from somewhere where we have a lot of respect for somebody who's older than you. If you know, like if you kind of, even if you go to a school or whatever and there's nowhere to sit, you know, the kids will get up and let you, I mean, it might be different nowadays. I haven't been home for a long time, but you know, it's very, very different how we interact with people.
Yeah.
And you know, it's, yeah.
So yeah, just to sum me up, then it's having that sensitivity, isn't it? And understanding the importance of communication and how to communicate. Because essentially what you need people, sometimes you're paying or sometimes they're colleagues, to actually do a job for you and do it right and do it how you want it to be done. So you've got to make sure you know how to have that conversation.
That's it. Yeah.
Because there is a purpose to all of this.
Yeah.
Rather than just, you know, being nice.
Yeah, because I mean, in all business, there's relationships that underlie everything.
Yeah.
You know, that's how we kind of interlink and stuff. So you kind of, and I do think, you know, businesses have a responsibility that if they are in certain jurisdictions and stuff, to kind of really,
respect that.
Respect that.
And respect the people who are working there, respect the relationship, build the relationship.
That's
So it's important. So from a more of a technical point of view, can you think of any other challenges or things to bear in mind when managing subsidiaries?
I think for me, a challenge has always been to make sure, because sometimes when you're in kind of, you know, you in the top co, say for example, you in London, you have all your regulations and the listing rule, you've got so many things that you're really focused on, and making sure your UK entities do what they need to do. Make sure what your top co, if they listed and stuff, there's so many things that you always constantly looking out for, is not forgetting your subs that are all the outliers everywhere. So you know, what do they need, what is their timing, when are their accounts due, when are their dividends due, do they need to be fed up, you know? So when you're looking at kind of top co and their dates and their, you know, calendars and those kind of things, it's sort of making sure you remember to keep in mind all those subs and their kind of due dates and all of that kind of stuff, and how that needs to feed into kind of what you're doing, because sometimes you can be so focused on running you know, that those companies that you sort of almost in a way
I think
forget.
it's I think in terms of the technical aspect, for me, it's been switching between the different jurisdictions. The processes are never
Because
the
this
same.
can be so different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's
You've got to think.
yeah, and I find it very easy to get things mixed up or
Yeah.
not such make mistakes, but mistakes.
No, no.
Yeah, of course, of
Everyone's
course.
Yeah.
prone to mistakes. So it's more or less keeping the clarity and just
That's
making
it.
sure
Because
that
if you think about it, well, in this jurisdiction, we've got to do it this way. We maybe
Yeah.
need 2 signatures, or this person needs to specifically sign, or that needs to be filed somewhere else, or we need to
Yeah.
notarize something that you wouldn't normally. So it's keeping on top of remembering sort of the different kind of quirks or requirements that you may have.
And I think sometimes as well with that, it's keeping up to date with the local laws and regulations in other jurisdictions and making sure that you don't over comply if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
But that's where your relationship comes in with
Exactly,
your
yeah.
local providers, which
Yeah.
you've got to have. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know
definitely.
many groups that won't have some function locally
Yeah.
Yes.
that is responsible for that.
So one of the challenges I've always found is that often people get fixated on the parent company,
Yes.
which is often just a holding company that
Yeah.
doesn't do
It
anything.
doesn't do anything,
No.
although it's got a lot of requirements,
Yes.
perhaps,
So
and
got
it's
that
front
scrutiny.
facing.
Yeah, but it doesn't do anything.
No,
it's just the face of the show.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas it's the
subs that are
subsidiary,
doing
they're the
stuff.
operating companies,
Yeah.
and they can be substantial. They can be big. So they can, and you might not know, might not be aware, or they could easily grow to a point where
They could trip up something that you need to. Yeah.
So they have their own reporting requirements through. They got tip over a threshold.
Exactly.
So again, it's understanding
And keeping on top of that
Yeah.
all the time. Yeah.
because I mean, you have your companies. They're the ones actually doing.
And they're the ones where things can really go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the risk is, isn't it? So.
And I think with what you say about the talk is, it's glamorous.
Yeah, and
So everyone
it's
wants
the
to do
public
it.
facing one,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's the one with all the we say what we do, all of that.
Yeah.
But actually, you talking about what the group's doing.
Yeah.
So you're
Really?
Yeah, essentially you're speaking about
Yeah.
the subs.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's understandable. A lot of I think subsidiary work is a lot of the time could be the nitty gritty.
Yeah, it is.
A lot of the time, and it can be.
And it's the everyday stuff. It's the
Yeah.
operations. It's what the business is doing. And, kind of the Topco board, they're the ones everybody knows. It's their biographies on the websites. It's all their information. But you've got how many other kind of directors who have duties, who have requirements and responsibilities, and who are actually doing what the business is doing, really.
I would like to know your opinions on operational directors on the boards of subsidiaries.
I think they can be good. I think they are good to have, although in my experience, which I think is really important to keep in mind, is they don't necessarily always fully understand what they're taking on. It's all great, I'm going to be a director and this and that. So I think it's really important for kind of the COSEC team to ensure that you are giving them thorough, good kind of education and a bit of an induction on, okay, you're taking this on, but this is actually what it means. This is what is expected of you. This is how, because I think the challenge can be is having that different hat. So switching from your ops, because that's what you do all day, every day. And then you go into this board meeting and we need to know your experience and your knowledge in the operations, but you also have to then look at everything differently in a more strategic manner kind of thing. And I know that quite often the strategy and all of that is driven by Topco. We know that, and that's kind of fed down. But they still are supposed to be challenging and questioning and really running a board, whereas it's quite often not looked at that way,
And a lot of directors, in my experience, who they get put onto a subsidiary board because they've been around a long time and they're good at the particular job, they're experts in what they're doing. So an SME, so they get put on that board, but they don't particularly want to be on that board.
No.
And they don't understand what directors' duties are and all the obligations that come with it. And I don't think this is even a succession thing, and the plan isn't to put them up to the top co or anything like that.
No.
It is simply because you need directors on
those, and it might just be those local companies need directors, and in that jurisdiction you have to have a certain amount of local directors, because there's all those requirements that you need to remember in jurisdictions, because some of them you need majority sort of, you know, local, whatever it may be, you know, and then they've got to be put on there. But it's us making sure that they know the responsibilities, they know the risks, they know what's required of them, what's the expectations, those kind of things, to make sure that they're fully informed
And
when
that's
they go
something
in
that
there.
we have done, and we've done training on that, of going into companies and saying, well, you know, you've been put on this board because essentially you've been working here for a long time. That's how the company does things culturally. But, you know, it's very different to the day job, which you really want to spend, where you want to get back to all the time. You've got to dedicate your time now to being a director as well. Whereas you said, wear a different hat, view things differently. It's a different role, and people don't always appreciate that.
Yeah, I think an issue that I've noticed is that there's either a lack of care for the directorship or the subsidiaries, I should say specifically. Even sometimes with the execs, if they're on a subsidiary board that they might not even really want to be on, they tend to neglect some of the work that they actually have to do, because, you know, some jurisdictions do have more legal and compliance requirements than others. So they might realize, okay, so why am I having to do more in this aspect of the business I don't particularly care about? So I think there's a bit of an issue there, and I do think that you can give directors duties training. You could tell them what they need to do. You can give them the high level reviews, but if they don't want to do it properly and they don't have that duty of care, then it's not going to get done properly.
And the problem is, though, then the business needs to be aware of that, because then potentially that person should not be.
Well, they're a risk, aren't they?
They are.
And that's the thing. And you can't put. Oh, I think so. Companies do put square pegs into round holes, don't they? And that's kind of a lot of the issues we're talking about here. Someone, just because they're good at one thing, doesn't mean they're automatically going to be a good director.
But we talk about that, but even, you know, kind of in relation to sort of board evaluations and all of those kind of things, and in sort of the top co and the big listed guys and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't mean all directors, whether it's NEDs or executives, you've got there by virtue of your experience and knowledge in something specific, whether that's finance or people or sustainability or IT or whatever it is. But it doesn't mean that because you are maybe exceptional at what you do, that you're good at interacting with people.
No.
And working well with people, and, you know.
No. So I think
it's top co, and it's all boards really, is that again, that sort of relationships, trust, you know, kind of getting to know the people around, all of that kind of stuff again is sort of, because I think, you know, you can be appointed as a director, but do you interact well with everybody else on the board? Because ultimately you're there to kind of hopefully be able to kind of, you know, challenge things, but come to a decision together. You know, you need to be able to work well with others, and that is not something that everybody can just do.
No, exactly. So I think it comes down to the fact is that you've got to want to be a director.
You do.
Because there's lots of risks and obligations attached, and responsibilities which could be outside of
that's it. But some people are like, well, I've got the title of director. This is great. It means something. Well,
so that's introducing ego into the whole thing. And let's face it, there's plenty of ego in the boardroom.
And you've gotten to your level by virtue of the fact that you do have an opinion and
and you want people to listen to it. So.
Because you know what you're talking about on certain things.
But you've got to.
But not everything.
Then become an all-rounder. And that's
which doesn't come easily. And, you know, sometimes people need, whether it's your executive coaching or whatever it may be. And I think the focus is quite often on having training and support on operational things or legal matters or finance changes, but people don't always concentrate on the fact that people maybe need individual support or coaching.
Because the soft skills are so neglected. So you've talked about executive coaching for directors to say, you know, this is a new role. This is how you do it. Because you say you're dealing with very often driven people who've been very successful in their careers, but now they're going to have to go into a different environment, and that requires them to admit they don't know stuff. And that can be quite hard for people to do. And it's about But you can flip that and say, well, it's a learning experience, and teach people how to ask the right questions. because and that takes the pressure off them, sort of saying, well, I don't know. Well, what is it you don't know? What do you want to find out? What do you need to know? And this is the way you find out, and you know, give people the vocabulary that they need.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing where the COSEC comes in. People who are new directors, so they're coming into a boardroom for the first time, to actually teach them help them
Yes.
understand the language of the boardroom.
Yeah.
Because it's something completely different, and it's alien to a lot of people. Because if you've never been in a boardroom,
Yeah, of course it's going to
yeah,
be.
and I think that we sometimes forget that we're in the governance bubble. So you know, we're talking this, living and breathing this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And we're used to the NEDs and experienced boards who also do that.
Yes.
But a lot of people don't.
And it is a different way. You know, if you come from ops and you step into that, it's very different.
So there's a role, I think, for the COSECs to translate that, make
Definitely,
it
it's
understandable.
that education piece that we're there for as well. So it's not just sort of the advising and knowing what's going on and knowing how to kind of get the business to where it sort of needs to be or meet the requirements. I think equally it's just is for us to be conscious of who needs support, who, you know, we kind of see the interaction, you know, and we should ideally, I mean, it's not always like that, especially if you have a dual role. You're not that independent, are you? Because you might have an operational role as well as your COSEC, so it's a little bit
That's a good
harder
point, yeah.
in a way. Because ideally, as the COSEC, we should have that independence to be able to kind of look from where we're sitting over everything, not just one part of the business. We don't just own, we've got the governance bit, but that kind of touches on everything, really, isn't it? We're not sort of the experts just on the finance or the legal or the whatever, you know, there's just so much overlap that we have to be able to see the whole picture.
Yeah, because, you know, companies rely on the directors to keep the company successful. So you then got to set up these people to succeed. And that will require some training, and it is going to, and some, whatever you want to call it. But, you know, you've talked about quite rightly how the role the COSEC can play, but they need, come back to that earlier point, they need the authority
To be able
and to be listened to and actually have that role to play.
And I always say this, this is what we can offer. This is what we should be doing. This is the value of us, but the business has to have the appetite for it equally.
Exactly.
You know, you can't drive this if the business does not have the
be
appetite to have
receptive
that. There
towards
have
it,
to be, yes. Otherwise,
I think mandatory training for new directors is very, very important.
Yeah.
You know, I've worked in a place where they have a complete induction plan.
yes.
You know, from start to end. You know, basic director duties.
Same,
You know,
yes. Where we've done it even on subs, we've trained incoming directors and
Exactly. Basic director duties, you know, your key stakeholders, maybe your harsher responsibilities, you know, you know, meeting with the broker, for example, meeting with you know, external counsel, etc. All these different
and
things.
board meetings and the importance of making yourself available.
Yes,
because if we say to you the sub needs to have a board meeting, say because it has to approve accounts because things need to feed up, or there's a dividend that needs to feed up, or whatever it might be, for them to fully understand that really they have to make themselves available.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
this is why board meetings are important, and this is what we do, you know. So again, it's that very much, and I think, you know, it is the COSEC and their team that are seeing this and thinking and coming up with okay, this is how we can support everyone.
I think one thing I would highlight is, rather than saying this is how we can support it, it should be this is how we're going to support it.
You need a sponsor who's going to give you that voice. Because otherwise, the challenge could be, why should we listen to you?
Yeah, but I mean, I think what people need to realize is that the COSEC is, you know, in most cases, and is it.
Yeah.
So they have the same voice as the board, so
but
they should be listening.
It's quite varied, because I've been a COSEC where I've been part of their executive leadership team within the business, so you have a voice on that because you are part of all of that. But I've been in businesses equally where it's not. You like a tier below that, so you sort of not in all of that, you know, you're not part of the strategy and all of that kind of stuff, which I think really you should be.
Culture shift.
But, and that's another piece of teaching people, because I think, if you're used to operations and stuff, you may be looking 12 months ahead or whatever it may be. But, if you're sitting on the board and stuff and you're coming up a strategy, you might need to be able to look at 5 years.
Yeah.
A real broad and oversight of, you'll have your expertise, which is why you're sitting on that, but also you are going to be making decisions on everything in the business. So it's that broadening, kind of your knowledge enough to make those, kind of decisions and ask the right questions of other parts of the business that isn't your expertise area, so it's that learning to broaden yourself on things, kind of a lot more forward thinking and driving, a lot more kind of in the future than what you would really do normally, sort of in your ops maybe.
Yeah.
One of the things we keep coming back to is that there's a focus on the top co, focus on the parent, whether it's listed or even if it's not listed, that focus on that. And because that's the company that will have to have the effectiveness review, and you mentioned those. So do we think then that, the big operating subs are a bit neglected in that respect? Because is anyone looking at their boards? Is anyone assessing their boards? Are they doing, they should be having effectiveness reviews themselves? Do you think? I think they should, but
I think the value is misplaced rather than ignored. Reason I say that is I think everyone is aware that without the group subs there would be no group. So, but I think they take more consideration into the information flow and the reporting aspects and those kind of things, but the actual running of it they don't care about as much.
Unless something goes wrong.
Exactly.
Or it's not, maybe I think sometimes it's not looked at as a board in the same way as it should be, if you know what I mean. I think it's kind of, okay, there's a board and there's directors, yes, but it's not sort of, it doesn't seem to be looked at in the same way as your top co-board necessarily. When they've got duties, they've got all of that same for that company that they are running, and even though the strategy and kind of the policy, all of that kind of stuff is going to feed down from group, they still have responsibility for their entity that they are a director of at the end of the day, to be asking questions and all of that. I know it's quite different because they're not setting the policies and that, so it is different, but they should still be challenging and asking questions and knowing what's going on within those subs.
Sure. When I've seen instances where, for example, a pack of documents has been presented to a director or one of the subs, and I've seen there will be a high level overview right at the top. I've seen them do this. Many times. So that in itself is showing that you have absolutely no consideration to what is going on within some of these subsidiaries. And I mean, it's a bit of a disrespect, I would say, to the people that are doing the work.
And preparing that.
Exactly, because imagine someone's written a whole high-level overview for you, passed it on to you, and you haven't even taken the time to read it through properly. So you don't really know what you've actually signed. You could have signed your life away. You signed half the company away to this person. You would never know. So,
And we talk about sort of the responsibility for the internal controls and that within businesses and that, but if you think about it, that all feeds down from the bottom up. So you've got to make sure all of those internal controls and checks and balances and assurances are actually working at every level, ultimately for it to be, because if you think about it, the top co, they're signing off everything really, but they need to have trust and knowledge in a way that it is working, that somebody is reading those papers and making sure the decisions they're making and authorizing are in the best interest of the business, and so it kind of feeds up to the top.
I was just going to flip it, because we've been kind of looking at it from the point of view of a UK parent company, overseas subsidiaries. What about when the actual parent company is overseas and you're working in the UK? Have you been in that situation?
Actually, yeah.
So what different challenges did you find there?
The different challenges, again, flow of information is the biggest one. So at one place I worked, we had a headquarters in the city, then we also had another in Singapore.
Right.
So you can already imagine the time zone in
so
itself,
time
big
zones,
issue.
problem, yeah.
So when we are beginning our workday, they're just finishing.
Yeah.
So sometimes an urgent request has come through from them at the end of their day, and we're getting it at the beginning of our day, but then so we're not really getting a
chance to do it.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a we had a bit of an issue with that, but we found a good resolution whereby we just made sure that information was fluid.
So the practical implications then of different time zones. I mean, something which I can remember working in a company that had, well, you got directors based in, I think the worst was having California, UK, and Australia to try to kind of have a board meeting at a time that could actually work for those three extremes.
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you what it was during the day in the UK. I can remember that much, but yeah, it certainly wasn't working hours, conventional working hours for the other people.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
I think even with that respect, I think it's if we go back to the cultural aspect again. Now, when I worked at that place, we had some people would work very unconventional times. There was that also became kind of an issue.
Well, it is to be available when the corporate office is online and they need stuff from you. Yeah. Or the meetings are maybe happening on a different time zone and you need to attend them or you'll minute them. Or, I've been in places where we've had sort of disclosure committee meetings and all sorts of weird and wonderful times of the day and night. And you have to be, it's I think if you choose to work for a group like that, it kind of is part
but then
of the
you
package.
don't. So you have to be very, very careful because you just don't know. You wouldn't know where all this unless you looked at the back of the annual report and went through every single subsidiary to see where it was.
Yeah.
But then you still wouldn't know whether you're going to be exposed to that. But
No.
I mean, you never really know how the business is run until you're in.
Well, no, and what's expected, because it might be that there are a bit more kind of where they can be thoughtful of the different jurisdictions and try and aim to book things at a reasonable hour. But quite often it does go with, can you get a hold of the directors? To be fair, that drives a lot of it, let's be honest, because they're the people who need to get together to do the meeting. But I think, that kind of where your challenges are is you're running the local jurisdiction, so you know your local requirements and all of that. But I think it's really important that you also then have to understand your topco and what they expect of you. So it's just the flip of everything else is to make sure that you know the processes and the policies and the expectations of who you kind of feeding your information into. So you're an expert in your jurisdiction, but then you've got this overlay of, okay, well, what do I need to do for them? Because they will have their own maybe different requirements.
One thing I should have actually mentioned is with the different time zones and everything. I worked at a place where we had, this is the same place I referenced earlier. We had a team, the COSA team was based in London, based in India, and in Singapore. So a lot of the time for us to schedule even a team meeting became kind of an issue because we're doing it first thing 9 in the morning, but then one of the other team members are finishing, so that their
energy levels,
exactly. So and then it's like we are now trying to get information out of them at the end of their day. They've already clocked out, and they're they're tired. They just want to go home, and
or if you have a request and it's the end of their day, but you
exactly,
need it,
and then always, of course, the London is of course let's say the powerhouse of most some businesses. So a lot of the operations are running through the city offices. So the information needs to come through for everything to be processed accordingly. So that in itself creates another issue. So those people that are abroad are having to stay longer to fulfill the wishes of the UK office.
I remember working for an Australian listed company, but again, all those parent company challenges, listing obligations in Australia, separate COSEC team there. We had nothing to do with them whatsoever because I was working in London, which is but that was the operating subsidiaries. That was what was making the money. But it was kind of all based in Australia, so it's a completely different dynamic and a different setup. But But I suppose because it was financial services, the companies themselves had all these obligations themselves, so it was very well run.
Yeah.
But it almost, you didn't know the purpose, you didn't know where it was going. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we had no transparency or any real link with the.
And this
the
is where
parent.
that's why we talk about that communication and
Yeah.
knowing the expectations and how things need to be done for the group and making sure that's captured. And I think, what about when you listed in multiple jurisdictions with time zones? So I've been in where you listed in the US, South Africa and Ghana. So South Africa and Ghana's time difference is not that much, but obviously the US is, and you've got a triggering event. So you putting it out, it's got to be, say, for example, with the SEC and the NYSE before 7 a.m. kind of thing. But what about, what's the time then in South Africa and what's the time in Ghana? Because they might have an equally triggering event from whatever's happened that needs to be reported also in a timely fashion. But what time of day is that for that? You know, so those kind of things that you've got to.
Call?
Well, generally the COSEC team needs to get their head around, well, if we release it at that time, is it okay to release it there, or can that maybe be released the following day in that jurisdiction, or is it the end of the day for them? Because, you know, quite often a lot of the things that you release, you try and do start of day or end of, you know, you kind of, you're quite thoughtful sometimes, if you can be, as to when you release sometimes information to the market, you know. So, but, you know, if you've got perhaps a triggering event in all those different jurisdictions, it's probably all going to look quite different in what you have to say, how you say it. So you need to prepare all of those different documents, but then equally, you know, make sure that the timing of it is okay in those jurisdictions as well.
Yeah.